and welcome back, space folks. How you doing? This is another episode of the Launch Sequence Podcast, episode 95, and we've got a past guest of Citizen Central on, but a first-timer for Launch Sequence. Welcome to the show, Voidy Dude. How you doing?
Very well, and yourself? Thank you so much for having me on the podcast show live stream thing.
Of course. Of course, we did some gameplay like a week and a half ago, and it was really good, and we got to talking about some things, so I thought I'd bring you back on so we could hit one of those topics that you brought up.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Cool. So today's topic is going to be about PvP again, but it's not your normal PvP griefing conversation. This is more about the smaller encounters that you're going to have in Star Citizen. So when you're out mining and you run across another miner, or you're doing patrols and you come across a couple of people in another org, or maybe you're refining and somebody swings by and asks you what's going on. The sort of civilian encounters we have as opposed to more combat focused stuff. And while we're going to get to that and eventually, first, Void Dude, I'd like to talk a little bit more about you. The content, or rather the games that you came from before Star Citizen, and what brought you here.
Cool. So, I mean, I've been playing computer games since I was about 6 years old. My dad actually, he ran like a computer hardware and software, like little, solo business kind of a thing for a very long time. So he was always, when I was young, he was always tinkering with whatever, sort of new and latest, greatest little piece of computer component or part or system or something like that. And I think, I started off playing games like, the original Prince of Persia and stuff like that. And, was hooked from a very young age, right? That just kind of led to, because that was an exciting time, right? We're talking about like sort of early 90s, like late 80s, I guess. I was very, very young. And these things, you kind of rode the wave as more and more exciting new games and stuff came out. You would just be there, and it was like a first-hand experience of like watching new features and new exciting things get added to games, right? It's like, Prince of Persia is now what, there's like so many multiple releases of that game out now, and there's like, new 3D versions and remakes and updates and whatever. And, transitioning from those games to like, something like Half-Life, I think is a big one. That's always worth sort of mentioning and talking about. Which was that biggest jump from something like the original Doom or Wolfenstein, where everything's actually Quake was probably the first one that was like fully rendered in 3D, and less decals, less like sprites or whatever. And then like physics engines started coming in, ragdolls, that kind of stuff started being a thing, and Unreal Tournament, I think that was one of the first games to have like, you played a death match, and when you killed your opponent, his body would ragdoll all over the place. And I just always loved these types of games. A lot of online competitive sort of gaming, right? And I think a lot of friends at school, we all shared the same sort of hobbies and interests, so gaming was just a consistent thing, right? It was in our blood, right?
Yeah.
Then sort of games like Counter-Strike came along, which was obviously originally a mod from Half-Life, and played a lot of that growing up. And then the rest is kind of history, right? Like, I think Homeworld, that was, I don't know if you've ever heard of Homeworld. That was one of my favorite, like literally my favorite game of all time.
RTS, right?
RTS 3, it was one of the first like 3D fully like up, because it was set in space, right? So it was like, oh, let's take Command and Conquer but make it 3D, and now you've got like 3 axes of sort of motion, or game space. And that was, I think it's more the artistic presentation of Homeworld that drew me in more than anything. That was really something special. Like I think I was about like 12 or 13 when it came out, and just like playing that game, like Adagio of Strings starts playing, and it's all epic, and it's like, ridiculously like fun game with just a very heartfelt sort of story to it that just resonated with me for some reason. And I always loved that game. So I think that got a remake maybe 2015, 2016, somewhere around there, maybe later. That was great times. And I think actually that was maybe one of the first things I've uploaded to YouTube on another channel a long time ago.
So you've been playing for a long time. It doesn't sound like there was a particularly strong focus on space games, though. have you played like a space MMO like Star Citizen before this game, or is this your first?
So actual space sims. I mean, I was on much younger. I was old enough to appreciate and play the Wing Commander games. I don't have the strongest memories of them. I do remember playing them. So when Star Citizen kind of got announced and people were saying, "Oh, Chris Roberts, epic space game," it rang a bell, right? That these were at that time pretty cutting edge things, right? You needed fairly robust systems to handle, like those titles back then. But in terms of actual space simulation type of things, I mean, there was the Freelancer. I played a lot of that. I played Starlancer, which was like the single player. It's kind of like the same as it is now, right? Squadron 42 is supposed to be the single player, and Star Citizen would be the expanded component to that, right? So I've always kind of looked at their analogs as like not privateer, sorry, Freelancer and Starlancer. I remember playing those to death when I was younger. And what else? Yeah, and there was another space game I played quite a bit of called Tachyon the Fringe. That was also very much like a freelancery type of thing. Rogue Squadron, big Star Wars fan growing up, big Star Trek fan growing up. So it's always just kind of been one of my favorite like genres of like media, I guess.
Okay.
So I think maybe that's the DNA or the history there, I guess. Yeah.
And what brought you to Star Citizen specifically?
I mean, I didn't know what it would become back then, but like the interest was that I guess the promise of this like vast, open, do anything, go anywhere sort of universe, right? Because there were quite a few space games back in those days, right? Those early days, and they kind of all just like sort of tapered off, and like sci-fi wasn't pushed as hard as it is maybe now. There was like I think Star Citizen was the genesis of a bit of a renaissance in the space sim sort of category. And just like the idea of this big open play space and being able to do anything like playing Freelancer, that plus multiplayer, plus being first person, right? The idea of you not being the ship. You're in the ship, and there's two components to it: the FPS side of things and the actual ship side of things, which was incredibly sort of exciting. And I think that's probably the biggest draw, right? And anything that could offer legitimate exploration gameplay, I guess, I mean, as things go on, right? I mean, I think I started playing World of Warcraft back in its heyday when about Burning Crusade came out. And that was, to this day, you look back at those games and you say like, okay, well, what does exploration mean in a game? What game actually does exploration well? Because that's actually the before the last year happened, like my goals in Star Citizen were mostly based in exploration. I figured that would be, if they could pull this off, fancy procedural generation stuff, interesting and smart game mechanics to drive some kind of exploration gameplay forward, that would be that's where I wanted to be. Like that sounded awesome. And yeah.
So
did we know how things would evolve?
Yeah. So when you were talking about like the reasons that you came into the game and you wanted to start playing Star Citizen, you mentioned being able to do anything. And I think anybody who's been watching your videos lately can see that you've been putting that to the test with some of your projects and your experiments. And that was kind of a big part of where we wanted to go into this topic today with PvP and the interactions you have with others. Why don't we start with one of your more recent videos? You had an encounter with a player. And
is this the courtroom for the following proceedings?
Yes, this is going to be your court of public opinion. No, but can you lay out kind of what happened in your encounter with these players to kick us off in this conversation?
Cool. I assume you're talking about the scam within the scam game.
Yes, the unknowing victim of your crimes.
Yeah. I think there's actually a thread here that I think we could wrap around back to, but like what I was trying to get at earlier with the other games that we've sort of referenced and stuff like that, seeing the technology progress, from like Half-Life to Unreal to this to that the other, nothing really came and said, hey, let's bring all these things together. It's like I found it weird that we're now playing games 10 years later that have even less features than some of those games did back then, right?
Yeah, we're
And
playing the
that's kind
same
of what
RPGs as we did in 2009.
exactly, right? So that's why Starson is so interesting, because it brings all these things together, right? Now add VoIP, now add, general communication, right? But I mean, I guess every game has that. But this open scale to do these things, which leads to these situations, right? And I've always wanted to probe and see what these things are like. Like, I never played much Eve, but what I experienced and did in that video is very reminiscent of, just another day in Eve kind of a thing, right? And so that guy did, he basically, for the viewers who don't, or listeners who don't know the video in question, there was a guy asking about trade lanes in Star Citizen. So he sounded fairly new. And I said, hey man, like, have you heard of Slam? Because he was just talking in global chat. And I just kind of figured there was an opportunity here, because I've been very excited about the smuggling, the fact that we have physicalized cargo now is incredibly exciting, because it opens so many more doors for creativity when trying to accomplish something in the game, right? And so this guy was basically asking about the trade lanes, and I said, yeah, man, there's, Slam's a thing now. It's this product you can purchase on Yellow, and I told him in global chat, I said, these places are incredibly dangerous, but you can make pretty good money if you pick it up from this place, and you can maybe even try another place here and buy even more, and then head off to Brio's on Daymar and sell it. And he was like, cool, man. And I was like, oh, man, I'll come with you. I'll go make sure it's clear and all that kind of stuff. But I stressed over and over again. I said, it's very dangerous. Like, this is, these are
Anybody
these are,
can be dangerous.
This is illicit product that we're dealing with here, right? And he was like, yeah, cool, let's go do it. And then basically, waited for him. He landed, guided him to the console, told him what to do. He bought the stuff. Off we went to Brio's, and then as we got to Brio's, there was an interesting twist, and somebody else had arrived, and somebody else had arrived in an MSR that was full of Slam and various other things as well, and a bit of waste. And so I took out both of them. Like, the intent was always to take out the guy that I sort of like guided to that location, but then another guy rocked up, and it was like a 2-for-1 special. So that was.
And this is why we can't have nice things.
Yes. And
okay.
I mean, now this is the thing, right? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
This is the thing, right? It's like, it really does speak to the whole griefing versus piracy debate, right? Because it's, I think we're very clearly cut into two camps. There are people who think that is atrocious behavior and should not be allowed. It is 100% griefing and was a terrible thing to do. And there are other people who are saying, like, well, this, you used all the game mechanics in the game, and you used them to your advantage, and you did a bad thing, but you profited from it. So therefore, it's legit con artist / piracy. And everybody comes from like various ways of thinking, and some people, I don't think the two extremes of this debate will ever find common ground.
Well, I think we will. I think it's going to be very particular, though, of how we do it. Because right now, our biggest problem is that we're all shoved into the same sandbox. And that sandbox is missing a lot of the tools. There's no shovels or buckets. I don't know, other things that are in sandboxes. Sand. It's lacking some sand. But it's like, no, if you're in a certain place and you do a certain thing, people in that place, because it is just so out of this world that you did it there, are going to react differently than if you were in another place and did it. Like, if you get attacked outside of Baijini Point, that's different from getting attacked outside of Grimhex. Same goes for being attacked in Stanton versus Pyro, Magnus versus Terra. Like, it's always going to depend on where you are, and Star Citizen's missing so much of that kind of context.
Yes,
apologies.
I think all those points you mentioned, plus a bit of intent behind the aggressor, behind the person initiating the confrontation. What is his intent?
Right.
Is he? I mean, there's no round-based score combat in the PU, right? That's Arena Commando or Storm Raid. So, what are they getting out of it, right? In my situation, I sat there and it took a long time, and I transferred all that cargo and I sold it and I made money, right? And that's, for me, that's kind of the goal, both in content and just the way I would play the game. It's right. You just want to make that fake space money, man. It's an addiction. and no matter what the no matter what you have to do to get that, like the way I actually do see it and the way I actually do want to play the game is just very opportunistic, right? So you come across opportunities, and this harkens back to the discussion we actually had before we went live. It's like you can load up a game like World of Warcraft, and you can commit to min-maxing your time to walk away. Say your goal is gold, and you want to just make as much gold as humanly possible. There is a designer behind this whole system that has specified if you do these dailies, these things, these quests, whatever it is, sell these mats, you will get X outcome. Do that for a month straight and you'll have X gold. There's no concept of high risk, high reward sort of gameplay in a game like that. And that's, to me, kind of boring, right? I've played that game, it was fun for a while, and I'm kind of over it. What Star Citizen brings to the table is that excitement of high risk, high reward. And there's no gate, there's no artificial gate or leveling system, character stat system aside, but a fresh-faced player who's been playing the game for a week, 2 weeks, a month can capitalize on a situation, find an opportunity, and make an insane amount of money just by pure chance, sprinkle in a little bit of emergent gameplay, and off he goes. And that is what draws me to Star Citizen. That is the most exciting thing ever.
Well, so you talk about a risk, and I agree with you. I think there should be an inherent risk in everything that we do in the game. Like I said, if you're in Pyro, that's different from Terra, but I don't think you should be completely free from piracy in Terra. Same way you're not going to be completely free from piracy in any place in the real world. But what about the balance between PvP and PvE risk? Would the game feel off to you if they said the only pirates or people in the game are actual computers and not any players can do that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I mean that would be a different game, and I think it would definitely turn me off. And it would be, like say there was a substantial piratable population introduced into the game tomorrow. How would that impact how the current pirates operate? You know what I mean? So it's like, at the moment, you can only really pirate other players, get that exciting gameplay, get the profits, and off you go. But if you could replace the prey or the cargo haulers with NPCs, what happens then? Like I had an interesting discussion with a friend a while ago, and he was comparing my experiences in Star Citizen to something like Rust, where it's like the same kind of skullduggery and backstabby type gameplay as possible, but there are possibly better ways to do it, right? So for some people to have fun, must somebody else suffer? And I honestly don't know, right? It's like, is it better stealing from an NPC who if you successfully hit an NPC and commit piracy against them and walk away with 1 million credits, is that better than hitting a player for half the amount of credits, right?
Well,
like why do Mongrel Squad do what they do?
Some people do it specifically for the suffering. It's the reaction that gives people the pleasure at
100%.
times when they're doing stuff. And I do agree with you. I think there are people who would be completely fine with there just being NPC cargo haulers out there that they could pirate. But there are people who want to do PvP. So what you bring up makes that kind of question a little more interesting. If the game were to say no PvP, but there are NPC pirates and you can pirate NPC cargo haulers, you just can't pirate or be pirated by players, would that feel at all natural to you for the game?
Nope, not at all. That would be weird. I think, and I mean that's part of the draw to Star Citizen is just like, because it's kind of actually hard to just speculate what that world would look like. How would these NPCs and stuff be acting? How much would they be worth on average? All that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's I've always got the sense that Chris and the developers want this game to be as like open and free as possible, where it shouldn't matter. There shouldn't be these artificial delineations between what an AI can do and is worth or is capable of versus what a player is worth, can do, and is capable of. They would want it to be a fairly one-to-one representation, right? I mean, it's obviously we're talking very much pie in the sky type stuff here, because the AI in Star Citizen doesn't have the best reputation or whatever. But if we're talking in like a future world where these things are further along, what does that look like? I have no idea. How would that impact my gameplay? I have no idea. If you introduced thousands of potential NPCs to target instead of players, I consider myself the goal orientation that I have in Star Citizen is focused around making money, which I think for a lot of people it is. But we haven't even scratched the surface of the other things, right? Like reputation or gaining rare things that you can't get with money. That's also a massive appeal for myself and a lot of other players. So I just haven't really aligned my mind to that way of thinking because it just doesn't really exist in the game yet. I mean, aside from like the Vandal Mask controversy and maybe one or two other things, I'm not too sure. But it's yeah, I mean, I really don't know what that world would look like, and it's an interesting thought.
Well, you make a good point in saying that a lot of the things that will make a difference in how you make these decisions aren't even in the game yet. So let's go back to your situation. You informed this player what was going on. You told them to trade these drugs to go to a place to get those certain drugs. You got there, you killed them, and then were you able to take the drugs away and sell them and make money, or what ended up? How did that finish?
Yeah, so then there's a whole bunch of logistical decision making because his Andromeda is like floating away or what's doing this and my MSR's here and I've got to get back into that and position in such a way, shoot all the cargo through, get it onto the grid, land the other MSR, get back down onto the ground, run to the kiosk and sell, right? So it's a whole involved logistical sort of process. But that's like whether that's intended game design or just coincidental because of the systems that they've put in place, everything you do takes time, right? And that adds to the risk and it adds to the excitement factor. And yeah, so it ended up making money off that guy. Unfortunately for him, I'm sorry if you're out there. And I don't care how advanced the AI is. I don't think that's something you could do to a non-player character, right? That required human interaction and an amount of like newishness. I don't want to use the word gullible. That sounds a bit demeaning. Naivety, I guess.
But all you
know
really,
what I mean?
all you really need though is a low-level NPC criminal that is willing to take you on their team, right? You do some drug running missions with them as a crew member on their ship, and then kill them.
And then exploit them in some way. So like exploit the AI in some way that is supposed to be your friend or ally, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That opens up a whole new bag of worms, man, because then it's like, cool, AI in the game now. Everybody's just exploiting them because they're exploitable now because they're smart and they're capable of like going to places and making decisions and spending their own, will AI even have their own credits, to spend? It's I think we're very far away from that type of stuff if it even ever happens, but it's a very interesting thought because then it's just like borderline exploiting, right? Which I mean, it's the same thing. What I did was exploit somebody. But will we ever see a day where we can enact that level of exploitation onto a non-human entity? Like
I think that's 100% possible.
You think so?
Yeah, because it really isn't going to be that hard. I mean, compared to making a regular mission for them, all you have to do is make sure the NPC is there. That's all you have to do. Just make sure that there is an NPC there, and if they are killed, it changes your reputation. Like, let's talk about a more simple game. You don't even have to have the NPC fly the ship. The NPC
I think I'm thinking in overly complex terms in my brain, but yeah, that actually makes so much sense, right? Yeah, like there 100% will be a day where you could pay somebody to move cargo from A to B. Yeah. Or somehow, I don't know, would you negate that buy-in? How would you make it so that you didn't have to pay them? Maybe there's a reputation with them or whatever, and then they come and move cargo, and then you just whack them and steal the stuff. Yeah, 100%. Okay, I agree with you.
And then how does that interact with reputation, with security systems? And I think that's the next thing I want to talk about is kind of if the game was in a further state. Like, let's say right now there are a lot of things that aren't protecting players from this heightened level of piracy that people think we might see in 3.18 and from some of the things that you've talked about today. But in the future, there will be security systems. There's going to be reputation, different factions, systems that track you. If you're a criminal, the comm system would be better. How do you think that situation you were in would have changed if those sort of complications were there to make that more difficult for you? Would you have even tried it? Would you have had to plan more?
So that is very interesting. Yeah, if it was harder to pull something like that off in like a high security system, which I guess Stanton is supposed to be, um, I don't know. I just kind of wing these things, right? It's like I'm hardly a professional pirate, by the way. Like I'm an opportunist, and I do not know the actual mechanisms. Like I'm still catching up on a lot of Mongrel Squad like Academy stuff, but like it's they've
There's a
always
good academy.
operated with
I didn't know that.
no 100%. They have a very solid understanding of the game, trying, like successfully doing piracy for the longest time now with the littlest tools available. So again, it's antithetical to what you're saying. It's like, imagine if there was more security, whereas they're operating under the sense of like, oh, there's nothing to actually accomplish this gameplay with except for what we have. So if there's more security and it was harder to do, are there gameplay mechanisms to, manipulate these things like the Comm system? Imagine a more advanced Comm system and more high security solar systems or whatever.
Yeah.
Would it have influenced my decision making? Absolutely, right? It's like, as I said, I'm primarily an opportunist, and the guys that I play with, we consider ourselves privateers. So we don't just limit ourselves to this type of gameplay. I mean, all I've been doing is really just running the like I've been only sort of playing in those spaces where you expect PvP to occur. I don't know what it's been like out in the salvage zones. We haven't really tried any of that kind of stuff. But, if you see a reclaimer coming back to base, back to a station with like a full haul of RMC, like you can't tell me that doesn't make you think twice about what could I possibly do in my current situation to get on board and make that mine.
I don't know, Void. I think that might be a specific way of thinking. Well, let me ask you this then. With those, because you said you are kind of doing these as the opportunity presents itself and makes itself aware. You're not going and planning out pirate activities or coming up with contingency plans or B plans. You're taking
not
these
smart enough for that stuff, man.
and I don't want to. I mean, I don't know what the balance is of people who are committing pirate acts or attacking other players or what, but I do imagine there's a pretty high percentage of people who do this stuff in that way. So if the stakes were higher and security was more present, would that be enough to push you into the pyro system or to push you out of more populated systems to do that stuff, or would you still be trying to hang out?
I really hope so. I long for the day where there's like long-term reputation consequences for actions like this. Like there should be like a separate reputation track or something. I think this might have been mentioned before. I'm not too familiar with the actual progress tracker, like plans and stuff like that. But I have heard mention that there is plans for like some kind of like side reputation track where if you go into Stanton and do enough bad stuff, you should no longer be welcome in Stanton, and sort of get a like if you enter a comm array, maybe there's a beacon placed on you and people can literally quantum to you to make your life misery and pain if you show up in the Stanton system.
Right.
Maybe that's a reasonable route forward, because like I'm very much like on the fence with these things. Like if these things happen to me, I'd be pissed off and I'd lose a lot of money or whatever.
Yeah.
But to me that's exciting. It's part of the game, right? It's like that's what makes the game so great and worth playing, right? The sense of danger, the sense of risk.
It's like the arena players that we used to play. You talked about Unreal Tournament, freaking even Call of Duty, Halo. Like all these things were fun because you could kill and be killed. Wasn't because you could go out into the game and kill a bunch of people or kill a bunch of bots while other people stood by you. Like this was a game of competition.
Exactly, right? And then you've got kind of like, as a tangent to that, you've got these games that have come out recently where servers, I think Battlefield 2142, whatever the latest Battlefield game was called?
2042.
2042 had that idea of if a server's not at capacity, it will be filled with bots, and then as people join, the bots get replaced.
Right.
And that actually resonates very much with what we were saying earlier about like, what if there's more AI in Star Citizen now? Because the impression I would assume from most people is when you join a server and it's filled with bots, they're like, oh man, I don't want to play against bots. I want to play against people. I want to, prove my skill against another human being. So yeah, that's such an interesting sort of conversation thread there.
And the hope is that obviously
I think it boils down to challenge. I think that's why hitting another player in terms of piracy will always be more exciting and better gameplay than hitting a bot. Because I don't think anybody's played a game where, yes, you can tweak numbers and make bots ridiculously strong and ridiculously powerful and have 100% accuracy and stuff like that. But no entity in a game has been able to like outsmart a player, and that's what's great about Star Citizen. You have this open play space with the potential for extreme levels of creativity, right? So yes, they go and they introduce the smuggling gameplay loop, and or not that it's been recently introduced, it's been there forever, but it's just the numbers seem to have been tweaked recently, and now it's like, because of physicalized cargo, those smuggle lanes around Crusader are hot. And if you're looking for exciting gameplay, which this is the kind of gameplay I would get once in a blue moon throughout the last year because Jumptown was on some kind of like schedule. Now I can get that every day, dude. And that is so exciting for me. Like that is the best thing that's ever happened to Star Citizen. Like I haven't been able to stop playing because I'm, camping out at Brios or, running with an org trying to find targets to hit, guys who are running drugs and you want to hit them before they can make the cell kind of a thing. It is thrilling, dude. It is such good gameplay.
Well,
sorry, I went off on a tangent there, man.
No, it's fine. We've been talking this whole time about kind of the way that players clash in combat, but this is also a conversation in general about the game being mixed with players and NPCs. And the game as a multiplayer game is going to require you to use other people to refine or to carry your goods or fuel your ship or repair your vehicle. Like all of these actions are things that both NPCs and players at least are planned to be able to do, which is kind of why, obviously, like you said, NPCs will never be able to match human activity, or at least maybe not for the next 5 years. I don't know. They're doing a good job with AI, but NPCs won't look like humans when they play. So they have to get them as close to human activity as just to be convincing or interesting to play with. But that includes a lot of other things. So do you think, let's just forget about combat. Do you think that this is a game that could survive, or rather, no. Let me ask this in a different way. Do you think that there are going to be opportunities for players to play the game without ever coming into contact with someone else, without doing any sort of refueling or trading or docking or repairing with another player, only NPC based, basically playing a single player game?
I think it will be possible. Would it be their intent? Probably not, because we do not have PvE servers and PvP servers, and I hope we never see that. I mean, I like playing the game solo. Okay, actually, no, you're saying no player interaction. I play the game solo, but have lots of player interaction. I don't know if it'll be their intent, but I think it will be possible. I think that one day the amount of systems and the amount of space out there will allow anybody to go and play the game and not interact with another player at all. Like, I think that will be possible. Whether they intend for it or not, I'm not sure. Would I want to play like that? Probably not. But I don't like, and this is the thing, right? There are players out there who would probably prefer that gameplay. And the thing is, when you start looking at it, like, I don't have stats in front of me. I don't know what the actual numbers are. I don't think many people do. But in MMOs in general, I think it's safe to say that the casual population that doesn't want to interact with anybody else far outweighs the population that engages in PvP and other two-player interactions that are not necessarily combat oriented. Right? I think there are a lot of people out there who enjoy the idea of a online world, shared world, where you don't necessarily have to interact with anybody and you can just progress on your own. I think people do enjoy that, and I think there's a lot of them, and I think they outweigh the other group.
Why do you think that is?
I think people like this is a trend that I think has started with a lot of the theme park type MMOs, because those games are essentially just a big progression track, right? It's not, there actually haven't been, I mean, I haven't played that much EVE in my life, and there are probably a lot of people who are saying like, oh, you're talking rubbish, but my personal experience, I mean, I've been just playing a lot of Star Citizen, so I might be a little bit biased and sort of uneducated in the matter, but even look at something like Diablo 4 that's coming out soon, which is moved to this model that resembles slightly more of an MMO, But a lot of people just want to play that game, not see another person ever, and just play the game, right? It's like it's the same because it's the same way that they played Diablo 2 or Diablo 3. They played it single player. I couldn't tell you why it is, but I think that's, watching, just keeping a bit of a finger on the pulse of these things. It's kind of like the trend that prevails the most, right? You go into a game that is not a round-based combat simulator. You expect to be able to do things and dedicate your time to not having to do combat-focused things, right? And I think maybe World of Warcraft acts as an example to that. And yeah, it's sorry, to finish up a point, the whole thing there is you need like, I don't care who you are, I don't care if you're Blizzard or CIG, you need to cater for the majority to a degree to keep your game healthy, right? If 90% of Star Citizens don't want to engage with other players, the game stops getting funded. You know what I mean? So it's an incredibly precarious and tricky situation that I don't know, because I've had discussions like this with one of my friends, right? And I wouldn't say he's a PvE Care Bear type of player, but he was appalled, like the video that I made. He was like, man, how could you do that to that guy? Like, that guy, like, he didn't deserve that. Like you've ruined his experience. He'll probably never come back to the game. You're an a-hole. And I'm like, but it was fun,
There is, I think you touched on something there that people do worry about a bit, and that is that, like, they do have to cater to the majority, and we're quickly seeing the earlier backers and people who were kind of following this game to discover the small features like engineering or death of a spaceman or the planet tech and the way it changed the 100 systems goals, shifting into the minority. And we could see a point at which the majority of players do want a game that is primarily playable single player. Because I think that what you say is true, that there are a lot of people who want to play the game single player. And from what it sounds like you're saying, the reason that they jump into games like Star Citizen is because of a lack of other games that focus on single player experiences, but also offer that kind of gameplay. Right?
It's like that hub experience, right? Where it's like, I think Elite Dangerous probably did this the best, whether it was intentional or not. But that's actually a reason why I was put off that game, is because you're essentially playing the game single player, but you've got like this shared economy structure behind it, where you're whatever you're doing may or may not influence that to a degree.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like, there was that idea a long time ago. I think it's a bit of a meme at this point, where they spoke about like having a PvP slider, whether they meant an actual slider or whether they meant like, oh, just stick to these systems and you will not encounter players who potentially want to ruin your day, regardless of how it is. I think Star Citizen has enough of the systems in place, and I think the correct word is like diegetically put in place, where it's like it's all handled so well in game, where if you maybe one day when more of these features are put online, you've got like a separate reputation track, death of a spaceman, whatever other features come online to help players defend themselves, and anybody who's out to do harm, grief, or pirate. I don't want to put pirate and griefing in the same thing, because piracy is a public service and a legitimate gameplay loop. How do you enforce these things, right? Because we talk about me, the PvP and stuff, and I'm like doing these horrible things. I am not very good at what would be considered the standard mode of engagement in Star Citizen. I'm not a good dogfighter. Like, I'm a terrible dogfighter. I lose 9 out of 10 of my dogfighting encounters with other players or bounty hunters, because they're better than me. But that doesn't make me want to shy away from doing piracy and PvP type things, right? And that's the magic of the game, right? You've got these levels of opportunity and creativity that allow you to get away with whatever you can get away with. So I think that's a pro point for my stance on this matter, because it's like I'm not sweaty at this game and like put in thousands of hours with a stick to be able to instantly destroy anybody who I come across. Like, that's not me. And when it does happen to me, like, I've been at Jumptown a couple of times where there's people camping at Jumptown and you cannot get close to the vicinity because these guys just outskill you 100%. And I don't think like, oh man, screw this game. I just think man, like good for them. They're a serious threat of danger, and they've hampered my ability to profit this day. I'll come back another time, kind of a thing. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's such a tricky thing, and I like the way Star Citizen handles it, right? Because anybody who comes across and wants to commit crimes and do things and be that opportunistic thief, pirate, whatever, that's just one great, meaningful decision that you need to make, right? And the decisions you make need to have fantastic and meaningful consequences. And I think prison is one of the greatest examples. Now, historically speaking, prison's always been like a game night ender for many people. If you wind up in prison, it's GG's. I'll see you guys tomorrow. But if you have enough interesting, meaningful decisions to make while you're in prison, it doesn't necessarily have to stop there. You know what I mean? And I think they've kind of trended in that direction now with the new changes. You can like literally clear like say you have like a level 5 crime stat, the new mission, you can clear that with one. You know, if you know how to navigate the maze of prison, you can clear that crime stat instantly, and you're back on your feet again. You know, and it can take you like half an hour to an hour. So yeah, I think it's just those meaningful consequences that need to come into play to make it so that. Because I think that they've always kind of said or insinuated that like being a criminal is like playing the game on hard mode. As of 3.18 live right now, I've only been making money doing smuggling and stealing from other players. Like that is literally the only way, pirating other players for their slam and stuff like that. I could probably be making more money if I just went and grinded out bounties, but that is not fun and it's not a challenge, right? So I think that goes back to that original thread that we were talking about. What would change if it was NPCs versus players? It's not so much about the type of target. It is about the type of target. I think people just want a challenge. Mongrel Squad want a challenge. I want a challenge, and that's what makes the game fun.
But we're talking about more than just combat here, right? This is about if the game can be played single player. That goes for exploration, refueling, salvaging, because I definitely want to separate this conversation from combat. I think when a lot of people think about players interacting, they think about combat and fighting and targets and piracy. But I want to talk more about how people interact with each other, whether it's buying cargo and taking it to the highest bidder on the top of the buyer list on your mobiGlas, and that bidder is a player. Would somebody, do you like, what are the chances that somebody would be able to do that, especially with the economy, like you said, with Eve being so intertwined with the gameplay?
So would it be possible to interact to play solo and then all your interactions are like like your interactions and your actual goals are dynamically driven by other players, but you never experience them firsthand?
Yeah. Is that worth it to play the game?
I think so. Is it worth? I mean, for some people, probably. For me, probably not so much.
And is it worth it for CIG to focus on making sure the game is playable in that way? Because like you said, the majority of people might want something like that, but it sounds very in another direction from what Star Citizen is shot for.
Yeah, man, I think if the game is big enough and broad enough and has enough depth to certain systems, or aims to at least have enough depth to certain systems, where that is probably going to be possible. Whether it's min-maxing your gameplay, because I mean that's, you know, if this game when it does become mainstream to a degree, most players are just they're gonna jump online, they're gonna, you know, especially if it's this type of like hypothetical play that we're talking about here, where they don't want to interact with other players, they just want to jump online, have fun, be casual about it, and not risk encountering anybody else. I think that's impossible because of the effect that everybody else will have on the game. Not to the degree of like something like Eve, where it's 100% sandbox, 100% player-driven economies and stuff like that. I think it does tend to cater towards that, but they will interact with other players indirectly. I think that's probably what's going to be most prevalent, right? The actions and the consequences of other people will indirectly impact your solo experience that you're trying to strive for. You know what I mean? And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's fine. You know, try and cater for as many people as possible, because the game's certainly big enough and has enough of these, like, you know, in-depth systems to warrant it. or to make it possible at least.
I think I kind of agree with you. I would be worried if they were trying to focus too much on the single player aspect. Not to say that I don't think we should be able to play the game as single players, but the more, let's take missions for example. Like right now, missions aren't great, and it's very hard to do things. It's hard to get jobs in the game that fulfill all the gameplay you want to see. Now, obviously, in the future, they'll be adding more and more missions to the game, but at some point, they'll allow players to give out missions. And players can come up with a lot more convincing and interesting scenarios. It might not be like they type out a whole mission and send it out in the Moby class, but like a player could be like, well, I want to build a base on this planet, and I need resources from all of these different types of things. I'll send out missions for miners to bring those resources in. That technically wouldn't be available if they were kind of trying to shoo people away, or not shoo people away, but offer more options for people to play without those kinds of missions. Not to say that focusing on single player missions would suddenly get rid of player made missions, but that's the idea that I'm going with. Like, as you focus more on single player content, some of that more engaging multiplayer content might suffer for it.
The way I've always seen the missions resemble at the moment is like pieces of a much larger puzzle, right? Where something like, and I don't know if this is intended or just something I've misconstrued along the way, where you've got something like Jumptown goes live. Now it's on a schedule, whatever. But maybe one day when the all these systems are more fleshed out, it is a single player will play solo and do a series of missions in a system, and somewhere along that link of events that they initiate, the final part is a drug lab gets activated and starts producing contraband. And at that point, that solo player can back away and go and do something else, or he can try his hand at the risk reward PvP experience at Jumptown kind of a thing, and then just extrapolate that onto non-combat oriented things, right? Maybe there's a chain of missions that will eventually lead to a salvage contract triggering, or that kind of stuff. I much prefer the dynamic nature of these things, like the hard-coded nature, or the very linear nature of some of the missions. I mean, it's we've all done them. You've done them once, you've done them all, kind of a thing. I really look forward to that dynamic, kind of a thing. And I mean that kind of, it's already started happening regularly now, right? I will rock up at sorry, it's always combat focused with me. I don't mean to keep on steering towards the combat focused nature of it.
I mean,
but with me, it's like
it's very common in the game right now, so it's easy to see it.
True. I like to go to Brios and wait around there for like smugglers to come in and try and whack them, right? But that is the emergent gameplay element that no game designer came near to sort of create certain scenarios that I find myself in. It's like, okay, well, I've been waiting at Brios for so long, and my ship got destroyed. Now I need food. Like, what do I do now? Do I open up global chats and like start interacting with other players? What are the solo players' options? If he doesn't want to interact with somebody, he's going to starve to death because he's found himself in a situation where he has no ship and no way to like consume his food because there's no atmosphere. Cool, problem solve that, right? Like, you can't do that unless you interact or keep on waiting for another ship to show up or something like that.
Exactly.
Right? But now again, extrapolate that onto something that's not necessarily combat focused or initiated because of an intent to pirate or do something in those terms, right? So yeah, it's an interesting thing. But like that's the kind of that's how I see the game going forward. Is like a lot of games do want to have like this crazy emergent gameplay type stuff going on, but don't have enough foundational systems in play to guarantee that it will happen now and then, right? And I think maybe that's one of the only reasons why you get hungry or thirsty in Star Citizen, is because it can potentially lead to some kind of cool emergent gameplay. Whether that's, I wanted to go to Pyro, but now I have to stop off at Bygenie Point and grab some juice. That was not that's now your mission. Your mission is now to go and get juice. And what could potentially happen to you on the way to go and get juice? Like, are you going to get pirated? Or could something else happen? And the more foundational level things in place to guide or ensure emergent gameplay, the better, because those make for the best stories and they make for the best like encounters. Now again, that's usually also going to include some kind of like player interaction. Like, I dream of the day of rocking up in Pyro and not having too many like hardcore PvP encounters. I imagine you're literally just explore like maybe there'll be this like cool dawn of like exploration in Pyro for a bit, right? Where everybody's just kind of gold rushing out there to see what's there, and you encounter another player, and that could be, how do they? Not that Pyro is the correct example for this kind of situation, but like how do you build in the systems to ensure trust or prevent non-consensual PvP, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, sorry, I'm going off on another tangent there. But yeah.
Well, going back to the situation that you said with needing to call for a player to get food, even in that sort of a scenario, if a player were to come on board and offer you some stuff to drink or eat, you don't even have to get pirated, quote unquote, in that situation. They don't have to kill you. They don't have to rob you. But they could leave something on your ship. They could take something from your ship. I guess that is robbing.
Yeah.
But they could take something from your ship. They could do something very, very light and something that you might not even notice that still complicates your gameplay in the future due to a player interaction.
Yeah.
And just knowing that there's that much scale of player interaction between different players makes it hard to have this conversation of PvP and only PvP interactions when so much of that conversation is focused on the idea of pirating and the idea of attacking other players. And I think that is a complicated topic that Star Citizen's going to have to figure out.
So complicated.
Yeah. Player interaction is not just attacking in this game.
Yeah. So in my opinion, there always has to be some kind of, not always, but like maybe the solution here is to have some kind of tertiary like threat, right? To compel player cooperation. Maybe that's the sort of the goal, right? Because I always refer back to like something like DayZ as an example. And I don't know about modern DayZ, but the early days of DayZ, I was very excited for that game because, oh, cool, it's a zombie apocalypse. There's zombies everywhere. Whenever you encounter another player, you're going to have this like fun emergent gameplay. First, there's going to be like a trust element. Cool. How do you build trust with this person that you've just encountered? Or is it just going to be shoot first, ask questions later? It's just evolved into Call of Duty kind of a thing. How do you go about like, doing that? Oh, well, it ended up being that way, even though that game had such cool potential for like all these emergent interactions where it's not necessarily about taking another player's life. There was one good example of like somebody getting robbed in that game, which went viral a while ago. How do CIG put in these systems, even some are out in Pyro, where it's not necessarily, how do you incentivize players to think in that way of not just playing the game as if it's Counter-Strike? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How many more other opportunities or gameplay mechanisms can there be to make it so that if you are playing Pyro solo, for instance, and you run into another player, how do they incentivize it so that your best bet to come out of the situation on top is to not be a murder hobo?
Right.
And maybe the systems of engineering might go a long way in that. The survival mechanics, running out of food. Cool, you've stumbled, two wayfarers out in Pyros come across each other. Maybe they start a conversation and figure out a way to help each other. Like, oh man, my relay's bust. I need item X, and your fuel's low. I happen to have some spare fuel. How cool would that interaction be? Like, that is fantastic.
Yeah, that is gotta be one of the hardest things that they've got to do is figure out how to make sure that people aren't shooting each other the first time they see each other. Like, how do you get in front of that action, or rather, how do you be proactive rather than responsive when it comes to violence in the game? I think
if there's sorry, Karen.
Well, I think there's a couple of things that they've introduced, or at least talked about, reputation and the security system, and how those sort of change across the different star systems. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then it's like individual reps. Instead of just like a good versus bad rep, it's like individual reps per star system kind of a thing.
Right. Yeah.
Then you'll even get those moments of like meeting another player or something like that, and they're like, yeah, I'm only wanted in like 3 systems, versus another guy who's like wanted in like 10 systems. And they've all got their own separate jurisdictions, which I think the way the game is kind of trending towards that kind of a thing with the fact that we have jurisdictions for Crusader, Microtech, etc. But yeah, man, I think it's all just about putting those foundational pieces in place, making the environment and stuff that isn't necessary, so the PvE element, threatening enough or meaningful enough that it tends to encourage cooperation sometimes, you know, because I
Right.
mean, nobody wants a game where every time you encounter another player, it is just going to be a gunfight, or every time
Yeah.
you encounter another player, it is only going to be cooperation. A perfect world might have 50-50 of both, right?
Honestly, I think it's going to change based on each star system. I think that Stanton should be like definitely
New
on the
York
lower
City,
end.
yeah,
20
it should be a
percent of the
high
time
stakes.
maybe.
That's it.
Yeah. Terra even less, 5% of the time. But Pyro 50-60% of the time you run into someone they want to get in a fight. Cuz I don't even want it to be where I run into a PvE pirate and they immediately attack me. I want them to like hail me, tell me I need to drop off some cargo, or tell me that I need to like make a promise for them, or something like that. Something other than just shooting, right? That's what I want to see.
Somehow I had an experience like that in the game the other day. I was sitting at Rio's once again, waiting for guys to sell, and I think we ended up killing each other, or they killed me or something. And then I like rushed back to Rio's as fast as I can, because now there's literally a ship sitting there with a bunch of cargo, and I wanted to get my body back. And I think that guy had already made his way off, kind of a thing. And all I wanted to do was like check out the situation and just like have a moment to breathe to figure out my next steps, right? And a flippin' NPC, you know, these NPC cutlasses have been rocking up all over the place. And this guy, an NPC cutlass, just showed out of nowhere and prevented me from being able to accomplish my goal, which was amazing. Like I could not. Every time I tried to land, he would just like blast me, which is fantastic to see, right? Now more things like that would lead to further player cooperation in certain circumstances, right? Like it's highly possible. So again, yeah, I think it all just boils down to like having lots of cool, detailed systems in the game that allow players to, you know, because not everybody's a good Samaritan and not everybody's a complete jerk who just wants to ruin everybody else's day. You know, you've got a wide range of things in between that. And I think the majority of people are the people who would want to help one another and just, you know, be the cargo hoarder, be the nice guy just trying to, you know, medical rescue type person. The more systems in the game that allow for meaningful decision making, and incentivization, that's the key thing. I think if cooperation leads to mutual gain, then yeah, I mean, theoretically we should see more positive encounters between players, right? Because I mean, that's one of the hugest draws for Star Citizen for me is, you know, imagine you're off in your carrack busy doing cool exploration things in Pyro, and you stumble upon another player or a medical beacon or something like that. You know, it's opportunity for like cool emergent gameplay. And I think that's why a lot of people are here.
You mentioned something there that gave me an interesting thought. And before I keep going, I did realize when I said that 20% of like encounters in Stanton being criminal would be terrible. I would hope it'd be more like 5, 3, 2% or something. But
only the ballsiest of pirates, yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That's a huge thing. Is like as the security and reputation systems get bigger, less pirates in Stanton, but higher skill ceiling.
Exactly.
Or skill floor.
Man. Yeah.
But you said, what did you say? You said that you would want to see people in different star systems. Oh man, I lost it. You said something really good. About
with like
working together.
Yeah.
About
yeah.
If you're working together, then you're objectively doing better in the game. That goes down a super interesting line of thought for me, because you get into the conversation of gamifying it versus kind of making it an immersive sim. If you're working together, should the company build in very obvious and clear, almost number specific signs that you are doing better than if you weren't working with somebody else? Or is this sort of an immersive sim kind of thing where if you're working together, if you're taking the notes and you're timing yourself and you're seeing how much you're making per hour, then you can tell actively that you make more money specifically because you're working with someone else. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
And it's like gamifying the pros and the cons versus just letting people figure it out in a sandbox.
Yeah. I mean, I think, so I don't know if this directly taps into what you're saying here, but like we live in this world, right, where the new game comes out and everybody plays the game, and then everybody just Googles what's the best thing to do in the game to get the best result in the game, right? And a game that has
and then they find your videos.
I hope not. Sorry. And then and that becomes very dull and boring, right? And it's like, well, nobody's going to go load up Diablo 4 on this early access beta weekend that's about to take place, where like the best stuff is already discovered, right? I guarantee you there's already like 50 videos out there, hundred thousands of videos out there that are saying what the best spec is for a certain class to just demolish the game. And that's very sad, right? But nobody can write a guide when the game is all about emergent gameplay and unpredictable player actions and stuff like that, right? It kind of, to me, it's a push against that type of mentality, which I find very refreshing, and more people should be caring about that kind of stuff. So yeah, sorry, I think I forgot your question.
No, no, no. It was more of a
Apologize.
observation than anything, but just
Yeah,
the idea that they've got a lot of things to consider when it comes to building in player interaction and trying to build in the pros and cons of doing that, trying to figure out how to communicate to players. Like,
yeah,
you don't, in the current game, a new player has no idea that growing to Grim Hex is more dangerous than going to mining area 18 on
yes,
Daymar.
yes,
Like,
yes,
that's how basic the level at which they haven't prepared the space for this sort of PvP environment is. So it's
yeah.
really hard to have a conversation about whether or not people are doing things correctly right now when you can't even tell where's safe to go.
Yeah, I think I'm obviously been so close to the project for so long that I absolutely lack that type of perspective, right? And it's like I don't even know how I figured this stuff out, right? It's just kind of been so involved with the game over the years of, and as new things come out, these, for lack of a better word, these metas are established
Yeah.
where this is what you do, right? Okay, miners are a thing now. Cool, this is how the game's going to work now, and if you're a pirate, this is what you do, and blah 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 blah. Absolutely, the game doesn't tell you any of this. How should you be figuring it out, right? And obviously one day there's probably going to be a bit of a codex, a bit of a thing that maybe describes yellow. I think at the moment, if you look in the star map, it'll tell you a little bit about Crusader. If you click on Crusader, if you click on yellow, it'll tell you, oh, atmosphere, like the a little bit of a lore snippet, right? But
Yeah.
nothing to say like, hey, this place has wars on it regularly. There's this place called Jumptown, and this place is crazy. Like, don't go there.
Yeah.
Which hopefully will get fleshed out in an in-game sense, 100%. Some kind of like lore codex with up-to-date information of like, I don't know, maybe even like player notes and stuff could be like published.
Or
I don't
even
know if that's
ATC. You check into a new location with ATC and they give you a 30-second spiel
That's
about
it.
where you're showing up.
That's it.
Hey,
Yeah,
this is how
yeah,
you need to act here. Like, and it's only the first time when you first get there, never again. And those are the
yeah.
things I hope they're building into the new player experience over time.
But would it be hilarious if somebody like rocked up at Stanton and they get the brief on Stanton and it says, yes, this place is pretty much, a built-up high security area. Like, not to worry, you can drop your guard, and then immediately get pirated by some players.
That also, there'd also be nice if there was like, have you ever used the ArcStar map on the website?
Yes, yes,
But you
great
know
tool.
they have like the danger overlay and the economy overlay and
Yes,
stuff. Yeah,
yes,
that kind of stuff would be very nice in the new star map. So I hope we see
yeah,
that too. Get more specific
yeah.
with it.
You're just making me think about Quanta now, man. Where's Tony Z?
I mean, that's such a huge part of this conversation we didn't even touch on. The economy,
Exactly, dude.
9 to
Hey,
1
how crazy is
AI,
that?
like and that's
But
why you just can't not interact with people.
yeah, I mean, I look forward to the day where people start committing piracy in certain areas, and then like I mean, obviously the quantum beacon system is very flawed at the moment, especially like something as simple as like initiating a medical beacon. I would
Yeah.
love to see minor tweaks to that where it is not, because it's actually very single player driven at the moment, right? You accept somebody's beacon, and that's it. You get the beacon, you go there, and you save the person. It should be like a broadcasted thing that you open up your map and you see this ping, 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 help kind of a thing, an SOS that anybody within a 50 million kilometer radius can pick up on and head to, right? How cool would that be? Then you've got dynamic points of interest that are putting players together, right?
I think what you're
Get a
describing is
medical
kind
beacon or
of, sorry, go ahead.
no, carry on. I've lost my thought already.
Well, I think what you're describing is kind of like what Korea is in 318.
Exactly. I think things like Korea, but now imagine Korea dynamically appearing on the map every time you log in. It's something else with a different point, with a different goal, with different perspectives going to this to a new place, a different place every time because something happened. And I think that is, I'm talking very generically there, but I think that is the ultimate intent, right? Is to have these.
That's the dynamic event, yeah.
Exactly, player-driven things that are taking place and taking shape, and it doesn't even have to be something as detailed as like a mission or a jump town or a SBK. It could literally be like a player-controlled Idris ran into some trouble. They're too close to a gravitational anomaly. They've initiated a beacon for distress. Now watch what happens. Everybody can now see that SOS. Watch the pirates rock up and try and capitalize on the situation. Watch the medics rock up and try and save everybody. Watch the bounty hunters rock up to protect the Idris. That kind of stuff, man. Like 100%. I think that's very much doable, and I'll stop inhaling the hopium.
I do hope that they can offer us the ability to put out missions that are specific. So if somebody accepted, it gets taken out, and missions that are kind of open join, like you mentioned there. And it does seem like they're getting to that point with, I mean, we know it with mercenary missions and the dynamic missions, how they're two kind of sides of that coin. And I think we're seeing that sort of with the new mining missions coming in, how they're saying like you can get one mining mission that kind of, or one salvage mission that assigns you with the job, and another one that allows anybody to accept it and show up. So I think that's the direction they're going in. Yeah.
100%. And anybody who's interested in that can then pick it up and engage with it. And you've got the buy-in element, you've got the risk element, you've got you're building up commitment from players to go to a situation and then try and capitalize on it, and hopefully they'll band together, with different opposing sort of viewpoints and see how it goes, kind of a thing.
So after this talk and all these points we went over, Void, in your opinion, should Star Citizen be able to be played single player in the future?
I think it can. I think yes, it should be, and I think it will be.
Okay. You heard it here first. Confirmed by Void. Come back to him if it's not the case. But yeah, I think it's definitely not a straightforward answer to the question. There's just different things to keep in mind. Overall, though, I do think that you're going to end up interacting in some way with players, whether you like it or not.
Whether it's first hand or second hand. I think, especially with like Pez, man. Like, imagine if you're playing the game solo. It's kind of hard to ignore other players' actions when something like Pez is a thing, and you can see their wrecks and defunct ships all over the place all the time, and all their bodies.
And if that wreck belongs to somebody and the system acknowledges it does, how does that wreck define if you salvaging it is PvP? Like if you were in a PvE server and you came across somebody's shipwreck and you tried to salvage it, would it block you?
Right now?
No, I'm just saying hypothetically.
Great.
Because would that be considered PvP because salvaging is seen as attacking? And when does that ship end up not being under the ownership of that other player? There's just so many ways to like see the game time-based?
If they filed a claim, then have they released ownership over that, hull or whatever? There's so many. It's a big game with big questions and big possibilities.
I think it'll be a mixture, but I do think you'll be able to do some kind of single player. Anyways, Void, thank you for joining me for a good hour of talk. This is a good topic. I think we'll have a lot of different opinions in the comments. Please let us know what you guys think on this topic. I'm sure there are agreements and disagreements. And before we go, Void, please let the folks, the good people here at the Garden know, where can they find your own content?
Check me out at VoidyVids on YouTube. Lots of exciting, timeless, evergreen, amazing content there for you to sink your teeth into. And yeah, that's about it.
Aren't you on Twitter?
Oh yeah, I'm on Twitter as well.
You got spicy tweets?
Yes, I think you're so good at this. I try to be very engaging on Twitter, but I don't know how good I am at Twitter yet. But that is literally the only other platform that I'm on. So it's YouTube and Twitter. VoidyVids and Voidy Says on Twitter. Voidy_says.
Yeah, unfortunately, you have to pay to tweet now, so sorry, everybody.
Oh, jeez, I haven't even wrapped my head around all that weird stuff.
Someday, I'm guessing. I don't know. It's, the town square that you pay for. Anyways, thank you everybody for showing up for another episode of the launch sequence. We are on that road to episode 100, getting started on all of that, and I'm excited to show you guys what we've got planned for it next month. But for now, I've been Space Tomato. This has been VoidyVids. We've been talking about that good old PvP, PvE, and I'll see y'all next week.